Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Hillbilly Elegy. So what Hillbilly Elegy is essentially about is we center on the character of J.D. Vance, and he is someone who he had a very troubled childhood, an abusive mother, and he grew up in like Appalachia and just not in a very good part of town, and eventually he was taken in by his mama and he's been able to clean up his life and things like that. But years later, he has this job opportunity. He's a student at Yale now, and he's got, he has a lot of things going well for him. He definitely is someone that is going places, but he gets a call up from his sister that his mother has overdosed, and basically now he needs to decide whether he wants to focus on his future or focus on his family, and we basically take the time to look back at what his childhood was like and things like that. So Hillbilly Elegy overall, I'll just be honest, I was not very excited for this film. Every single year, this is around the time where Netflix releases a lot of great stuff. There's a lot of really great awards contenders in there that I actually do really love and do look forward to, and they really do deliver. But there's always that one movie that they have, and it just feels like a film that is trying so hard to be an Oscar hopeful, and Hillbilly Elegy very much seemed like it was trying to be that film, so I really was not that excited for this. It just looked very Oscar baity in that way, and honestly, the film was getting demolished by critics and things like that. And is it deserved? No, I don't think it's one of the worst movies of the year, but this is still a piss poor film that is, I think, very badly put together. It's one of the most desperate attempts to be an Oscar film that I've seen in a while. And just overall, I think it's just not a very well put together film. But we're just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And going into this movie, that's definitely, I think, going to be the biggest draw for people. You see the cast here. There's a lot of talented actors in this film. You see the people that are here. You're thinking that they're all going to get, some Oscar recognition. And honestly, and this is what's most surprising, a lot of them don't deliver in the way that you want them to. This cast overall, don't get me wrong, some of the performances are really good, but a lot of them just don't really deliver. The most shocking of the bunch, without a doubt, actually being Amy Adams, who I really just did not think was that great here. And she obviously was the main thing I was looking forward to going into this movie. Even if the movie didn't turn out good, I at least thought Amy Adams was going to give a great performance, and she really doesn't. I think aside from the fact that she is a very talented actress, she just in this film feels very flat as a character. It just feels like there wasn't a lot of direction given towards her. I don't know if I want to blame her performance or if I really want to blame the direction, because it feels like her only real direction is just be angry, be very abusive, shout a lot, just sound like you're crazy, and none of it is convincing. It doesn't feel like this is a real person, which is shocking for Amy Adams, because I feel like she's such a transformative actress. Look at something like Sharp Objects, for example. Here, it just really feels like Amy Adams playing this role, and that's very disappointing. It lacks a lot of authenticity. It lacks the richness that she usually brings to these characters, and just overall, I had a very hard time connecting with her. There were once in a while a few moments where I thought she was okay, but any time that this character has to have some kind of a meltdown or she's screaming at JD, it's just so over the top, and it's very hard to take seriously at points. And I just couldn't believe how flat she really was here, and just how one note of a performance this really is. I expected so much more from her, and she easily was the thing that disappointed me the most in this film. I was very let down by her performance. Now, I will say, the one performance that definitely does kind of save this film, and actually I think is worth recognition, is that of Glenn Close, who is really good here as the character of Mama. Mama is not your typical grandmother. She's not, very nurturing. She's not very kind in the way. She's actually very stern and very rough around the edges, but she's also someone who deeply cares about her family, and she wants to get them out of this situation, and I really liked that that about her character. You know, whenever she had a scene with JD, it's one of the only times where the film actually felt sincere, where it actually felt like, this I can buy into. This actually feels like this is a real person. And I thought Close did a really good job with that overall, and I was very impressed by her performance throughout the film. I thought she did a really strong job at playing this character that, again, has had a lot of regrets within her life, but you really do see how she's trying to make up for that, you know, with caring for JD and caring for her daughter, and I just really liked that about her as a character. I thought she easily was the most consistent performance for me. The rest of the cast is very 50-50. I think Owen Azeltalos, I actually was very impressed by. I thought he gave a very good child performance. I really haven't seen him before at all, but I really liked what he ended up doing here. I thought that, you know, you really felt like he's someone that is just very misguided in the way that he goes about things, and he wants to be a normal kid, he wants to have normal friends, but he's just in the worst possible situation, and I thought Azeltalos portrayed that very well. I really liked his performance in the film. I thought he definitely was one of the more consistent actors, and it's a performance that I definitely do want to see more from him in the future. I think he's a very, I think he definitely has a bright future ahead of him in terms of child performances, and I really like what he ended up doing. Gabriel Basso, on the other hand, I just thought was very bland. I didn't think he was bad necessarily, but he just was very wooden in this role. It didn't really feel like there was a lot of emotion out of him. He just kind of felt very wooden, and I just wasn't that impressed by his performance. Haley Bennett, I actually thought was pretty good here, even though she really doesn't have that much to work with. Freida Pinto's okay here. Bo Hoskins. Overall, this is not really that great of an ensemble, which is surprising for a film like this, but they really just don't deliver in the way that you want them to, and I think that's one of the biggest issues with this film, is just the cast just did not seem as into this as you would expect overall. But now we gotta get to the directing and the writing, which the directing is easily one of the biggest question marks of this entire film, because you look at the premise of this film, it's very much supposed to be about like this this life story, and, you know, trying to portray things in a very authentic and a very potentially dark manner, and, you know, it's something that is clearly very close to J.D. Vance's heart, who I know people don't like J.D. Vance. I don't either, from what I've heard, but, you know, this is something that he is passionate about. This is something that did actually happen. And so you would think they would get someone who has, you know, directed films like this before. But instead, we get someone like Ron Howard, who, over the years, his films have been like, say, The Da Vinci Code, and Angels and Demons, and In the Heart of the Sea, and Solo: A Star Wars Story, and not really known for serious biopics such as this one. So you already see the issue here, and his directing here could not be any more, you know, it could not be any more just lacking in terms of passion and in terms of direction. I just think he is extremely lacking in every sense. It doesn't really feel like he had a clear direction of what he wanted to do here. It also doesn't really feel like he had a lot of passion into this story. He didn't really seem to care much about this. Every moment that's supposed to be dramatic is way too dramatic in terms that it feels melodramatic. It feels like something you'd see on like Lifetime or something like that, and I don't think he handled that well. The moments that are supposed to be more lighthearted just feel very weird, and you don't really know how you're supposed to feel in those scenes, and just overall, it's not a very well directed film. I had a very hard time trying to figure out what Howard was trying to say throughout this film in terms of his direction. It really felt like he didn't know what he wanted to do. Like, he got this project and he's like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And then he's like, oh, fuck, I have no idea where I want to go with any of this story. And it really does show in his direction. And Vanessa Taylor's screenplay, though, as well, definitely does not help either. I think her screenplay is incredibly weak for this film. Definitely one of the definitely one of the biggest clusterfucks of a screenplay I think I've seen all year. There's a lot of things that don't work about this film in terms of the story, and I think the biggest one right off the bat is J.D. Vance as a character is so boring in this film. It's one of those things where, you know, you see Amy Adams, you see Glenn Close, you think they're the main character, but no, it really is JD's story. And the problem is, JD as a character, he's just so lacking in every area. He's such a wooden character. He's so flat. He doesn't really seem to have much of a compelling arc. There's nothing about him that, you know, drives me to his character. There's nothing to really latch onto there. And I understand that that's who J.D. Vance was, but I feel like for something like this, you needed to give him a few more layers. And I felt like they were there, but they just didn't really do it. You know, really his whole arc is that he grew up on the wrong side of the tracks and he's trying to clean up his life, but the reason it's not compelling is because we already know what he was able to accomplish. We already know how he was able to fix these struggles, so you just never really feel like you're that attached to him. He also just is not a very positive character. You know, he's not someone where you find yourself feeling like he's very likable. He's someone who, honestly, you don't really want to follow much. And I think that really is to the fault of Taylor. I understand that people don't like J.D. Vance, but if you want to do that, you should have presented him in a way where, you know, we're not supposed to like him, but I'm pretty sure we're supposed to like J.D. Vance, and I just did not give a shit about him in this movie. I found him to be such a boring character, and I don't think she did a good job with that at all. But the story that's being told here as well, I don't think is well handled either, because the biggest issue I think with this movie for me, besides J.D. Vance as a main character just being so just incredibly just dull and unexciting and just, I did not give a shit about him, is the story itself. It just is not presented well, because I think what they're trying to go for here is they're trying to tell this story about this family and how much they cared about each other, but we're really only told that. What we're shown is basically just a bunch of shouting. You know, we're not really shown a lot of moments where we see how JD cared so much for, you know, his mother. And he talks about how, like, oh, she was there for me, like, she wanted to be there for me. But there's really only one moment in this movie when these two are, like, going out to get baseball cards that actually feels like Beverly Vance, as a character, was trying to be a good mother towards JD. You never really feel like that's the case. Most of the time, she's shouting at him, she's hitting him, she's hiding things from him, she's drinking, she's smoking, she's missing things. She's just an absolute mess of a character, and you wonder why anyone would want to be in that kind of environment. And so I think what's really missing, though, is the stuff in between. The more tender moments between these characters, those are not there at all. And so you don't find yourself caring about that relation because it just becomes so alienating. Pretty much from the second Beverly's on screen, you're just like, yeah, I don't like this relationship at all. You just really want nothing to do with it. And I think the same goes for the character of Mama, who, you know, she's really trying to clean up Beverly as a character, but you don't really get to see that. You see more of them just yelling at each other, and how JD's accusing her of not being there for the family, which she's really not being. And again, she does go in an interesting direction. I do think that what they did with Mama made sense, but even at that, I think as a character, she's very underwritten, because this film is trying to cover like 3 decades worth of storytelling, and it all just feels so truncated. We're constantly jumping back and forth between these two timelines. Meanwhile, there's a third timeline to when Mama was younger, trying to raise Beverly, that barely feels like it gets any screen time whatsoever. There's maybe like 3 scenes that are actually devoted to that, and I really do feel that brings down the film. This is all stuff that's very important, but it's skipped over and just told to us verbally, and I think that really hurts this film over. And Beverly as a character as well, again, is just very flat. All of these characters, every single character in this movie, even Mama, who, like I said, I do think is the most well-written character, none of them feel like actual characters. They feel like caricatures. They feel very one-note. Like, they all are just focused on this one idea, and that's really it. That's the only thing that they want to dive into with them. You know, with JD, it's just which path he wants to take in life. With Beverly, it's that she's a wreck and she's doing heroin and she's drinking. With Mama, it's the fact that she wasn't there for her child and now she kind of wants to be, you know, and it's the same with every single character. No character feels well realized. No character feels like a three-dimensional being, and so it just really took me out of the film, and I think that's what really brought this entire movie down for me, is just none of these characters felt like that's something compelling, that's something that I can relate to, that's something that I can get behind. There was just nothing like that, and it's just so fundamentally flawed in terms of storytelling, and I think that more than anything is what brings this film down. So I also think the fact that so much of this film is through JD's perspective, I think that also robs a lot of characters. Beverly especially, again, she just feels like a very abusive mother, and it doesn't really feel like there's anything else to her besides that. And characters like Haley Bennett, for example, who is her daughter, feels irrelevant in this story. You honestly forget that she's there. We never see what their relationship is like. We never see what Beverly is really doing besides her relationship with JD and stuff with Mama. She just doesn't feel like a well-realized character, and I'm not gonna lie, there were many points where I was straight up laughing at what was going on. You know, in the trailer, there's like a scene where she's, being like arrested by the cops. I was literally laughing at that scene because it's portrayed in such a ridiculous manner, and I don't think the film does a good job of giving it any real authenticity at all. It almost felt like at points that it was making fun of the situation. I've heard some people say this, and I'll agree. There are points of this film that feels like an SNL digital short. It doesn't feel like an actual scene in a movie. There's so many scenes that just ring false, and I don't think they're portrayed well at all. I've also heard people say that the film can get very offensive as well, that there are a lot of moments that really offended them, and I can't really blame that because, again, I think the reason people are so offended is because these characters, they don't feel like these nuanced, multi-layered human beings. They feel like caricatures. They feel like cliches of what you would expect a hillbilly to be like. You know, they're always yelling, they're always shouting, they're crazy. They're literally crazy, and I don't think that's handled well at all, and I think that's another thing that just doesn't work in this film. I think if you would have given more layers to some of these characters, I don't think the film would be receiving those kind of criticisms, but I think because they didn't, I think that also just really hurts this film overall. So it's one of those films where I really just feel like everything they were focusing on was the wrong idea. You know, they had some good ideas in there, but they're not focusing on the right things, and that's what really brought this film down for me. I just think as a screenplay, it was not very interesting. When you're in the present day and JD is deciding whether or not he wants to help his mother, you don't care about that either because you already don't care about that relationship to begin with, but also when they're jumping back to the past, you don't really care because you already know what's going to become of these characters, and I just feel that that really robbed the viewer of, you know, valuable story, and I feel like it just was not a very well-constructed screenplay. Overall, I just did not care about this screenplay at all. I think it's incredibly messy, and I just think there's a lot of areas it just does not work. A lot of ideas that we're told about that we shouldn't be. Like, for example, they talk about how Bo Hoskins' character was very close to Amy Adams and how she had this very close relationship with her father, and it's like, okay, well, why aren't we seeing it? You know, this event happens in the movie about, I want to say, like 30 minutes in. We're supposed to be really affected by it, but I did not care at all because we barely saw anything involving this particular relationship, and so I just did not find myself caring. Even though the film desperately wants you to, we don't, and that's because we didn't have that valuable time we needed with these characters, and the film has ample opportunities to do that, and it just chooses not to because it wants to go back to the melodramatic, one-note storytelling about recovery and about how JD got out of this environment and how he's hanging out with these friends that are bad news, and it's like we've seen this story done so many times before. The film does absolutely nothing to make it different, to make it feel fresh, to make it stick out, and it just makes the screenplay just very alienating, and it just never really works at all for me. A lot of the characters as well, some of them, there's absolutely nothing to them, like Freida Pinto, for example. She's just JD's girlfriend. That's it. She's JD's girlfriend. She has zero identity besides that. Haley Bennett is just JD's sister, who I guess has some guy in her life, and wasn't really taken care of well, and she stayed in Appalachia, and that's kind of it. There's nothing to any of these characters, you know, and that's, again, the thing that really brings this down, is that these characters are just robbed of really anything compelling, and that's what really brings the film down for me. Cinematography-wise, I don't think this film is that bad. I think it looks pretty good, you know, especially between the two timelines. I think they do a good job with that. Appalachia, overall, I think is covered pretty well, so I don't really have a problem in terms of cinematography. Hans Zimmer's score is really good. That's to be expected, though. It's Hans Zimmer. You expect that he's going to deliver, and he very much does, and I think it definitely elevates some of the more melodramatic scenes of the movie where I had a very hard time taking things seriously. In fact, at times I was laughing at what was going on when I very much was not supposed to be. So I'll give him that, but the other thing that severely hurts this movie has to be the editing. The way this film is paced, I think, is truly horrendous. It's constantly jumping back and forth between the present and the past, and I already talked about how little we care, but I think that is really the thing that hurt this film the most. If this film had been presented in a more linear fashion, I actually think that it could have worked, but instead, it's like this weird frame story of sorts, and it never really quite works at all. You don't really understand why they chose to go with this structure, because I feel like it hinders the film more than anything. So if we would have started off with, you know, seeing the, you know, what Mama did to Beverly, and then Beverly giving birth to JD, and then focusing on that, and then eventually JD growing up, we would have cared a lot more, because we wouldn't know what happens to JD. We wouldn't know that he's able to turn things around. We wouldn't know that he gets out of the situation, but we're told in the first 5 minutes, like, what he's accomplished, what he's up to in the present day, and so it just makes a lot of the film far less impactful than it really would be. And the way the movie ends, too, I think is incredibly unceremonious. It really just felt like they didn't know how to end the film overall, and I had a very hard time figuring out what the message of this movie was really trying to be. I think they want us to think that JD is proud of his family, but I can't really imagine why, because what we see in the film, it's not really a good family life. It's very toxic. It's a very sort of toxic environment that really just caused him more harm than good, and I don't really understand why he's so, like, thankful for them. I mean, maybe there's something I'm missing, but I just don't think that's documented well in the film either. Overall, Hillbilly Elegy is just the definition of a very fundamentally flawed film. It's a film that wants so badly to be Oscar bait. It wants to be seen as this huge, like, Oscar frontrunner, and it really is anything but. Scenes that are supposed to be sincere just feel so melodramatic, and there are so many scenes that just drag on and on. The story itself is not interesting. Our main character is really boring. The performances don't even really elevate that much, besides Glenn Close and Owen Azeltalos, as I said before. It does have a good score from Hans Zimmer. There are some good ideas in there overall, but as a film, I just don't think any of it really came together in the way that I wanted to. I think there are just so many things that just don't work in this film. I think overall, it's one of the most desperate attempts to try to be an Oscar hopeful that I've seen in quite a long time, and it's definitely a film that I think is absolutely dead on arrival. I don't really see this getting any sort of traction whatsoever in terms of awards season. I don't really see that happening. It's not the disaster that everyone is saying, but I just think overall it's very much a huge dud for Netflix, especially when they're releasing so many good films towards this last half of the year. This is definitely not worth your time at all, and I am going to give Hillbilly Elegy overall a C-. But overall, guys, in my review of Hillbilly Elegy, let me know what you guys saw this movie, all of your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
Moving on.